turnout. This was a few people's idea, but Jane did a really good job of putting this together, so thank you. Oh yeah, so Jane and I are going to kind of host this for you. We're going to hear from a few people. We have some things from family members that want to be read. There's a few videos we're going to show, and then we're going to call a few people up to tell some stories, and we're going to kind of open it up after that. There will be a lot of toasts throughout the next hour or so. Please make sure you have something cold and alcoholic in front of you. If you do not, Marty's daughter Renee has generously offered to buy every single person here a drink.
Thank you.
Feel free to go up there and grab that whenever you'd like. Filtering out of here, come up, grab some food. Just trying to kind of keep this area clear. We also have a giant bottle of Irish cream liqueur over there. Please feel free to help yourself to that. Take a shot during the toast. But let's have some fun and kind of just enjoy Paul and everything that he was. Okay. Guess it doesn't work if you're not doing karaoke. No, maybe later. Or maybe not. Or maybe not.
That's the best of it.
So I'm going to have Jane kind of start off with telling you guys a little bit about Paul, who he was. If anyone didn't know who Paul was, you're going to find out in just a second. Just how lucky we were to have him as a member of our club here.
Okay, well, there was a lot to Paul. He lived a very full life, but since we are a bunch of curlers in a curling club right now, I'm just going to talk about curling. And also, that's all I know anything about, and nobody trusts me to talk about anything else. So, we're going to talk about Paul's success in curling. So, you might already know that Paul was a very well-known curler in Canada. I would say that was probably a giant understatement. And I'm going to be honest that when I was putting together this kind of highlight package, the hardest thing was keeping it short, but I still recommend you get comfortable because there's a lot to talk about. Paul was born in Winnipeg, and despite that, he became a pretty good curler. Seriously, Manitoba is a very tough province for competitive curling today, as it was then. In 1969, he made it as far as the finals of the provincials, and if my math is correct, he was 23 years old at the time, which is amazing. Life eventually took him to Edmonton, Alberta. Alberta is another very tough province to play out of. His big breakthrough was making it to the finals of the 1978 provincial, where he lost to Ed Lukowich, who went on to win the Brier that year. Also, if you don't know the names of these people I'm saying, Bob and I are going to have a seminar series. Let you know who all these people are. So Ed went on to win the Brier that year. So, I mean, I don't mind losing to the guy that ends up winning. I mean, it's not so bad. So at the time, Paul was a car salesman. And I guess his employer was getting a little miffed with all the weekends away curling. So he gave Paul an ultimatum. He said, you can choose curling or you can choose your career in car sales. So, I mean, I know what I would choose. And I guess Paul chose the same thing, so he quit that job and kept curling. So while he was in Edmonton, he was playing with his brother Derek, who was working for Imperial Oil. There was another young guy who had gone to school with Derek, who was also working for Imperial Oil at the time. His name was Pat Ryan. I should hope most of you know who Pat Ryan is. I'm fangirling right now. Pat, at the time, was taking a bit of a break from competitive curling to get his career going. But Paul and Derek were either very persuasive or made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I'm not sure which, but Pat joined their team, and then I'm sure he was glad he didn't refuse that offer, because that year, Paul, John Hunter, Pat, and Derek met Lukowich again in the provincial final, and this time they beat him. They headed off to the 1979 Brier in Ottawa, and they went 6-5. First Brier, I think, for all of them, was it? Yeah. So if you like curling history, and if you're a podcast kind of person, I would recommend one called Curling Legends. It's stories from curlers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's really interesting. And Kevin Palmer, who hosts that podcast, he told me that one of his biggest regrets is that he never got an interview with Paul. He talked to him on the phone, and they talked about doing it, but they just never set it up. And I said, I regret that too, because I think that would have been a hell of an episode. So that's a shame. But if you listen to enough of the episodes, you hear these legends of curling mention Paul's name, I mean, at least a half a dozen times. He was very well known and very well respected. Pat Ryan, for example, in the episode that he's featured in, talks about that 1979 team. He says that Paul was a very smart curler and a very good teacher, and I think all of us would agree with that. Pat also talked about the Broomgate of the time, which was the rule-free, painful changeover from corn broom to push broom. Anybody remembers that? On Team Devlin, at the time, they used corn brooms. But then Paul started noticing how much more effective the push brooms were, and he just said, that's it, we're going to push brooms. And that was it for the corn brooms. Like, the team could not use them anymore. And that story kind of made me wonder if that broom that he used to deliver with was from 1979. It could have been, right? So Paul made it to the Alberta final one more time with a different lineup, and he lost to Paul Gauzel, another legend of the day, if you know that name. So then in 1983, Paul moved to Vancouver, but he was still allowed to curl in the 1984 Alberta Playdowns, which I guess was really controversial at the time. But I think he was just pioneering the residency rules. He was just the Alberta's team import, right? That's cool, you can do that. But they didn't win that year. I think Luke Witch did again. The next year, though, Paul went back to the Brier, playing out of BC, which is where you guys stayed. That was 1985, and this is where I need to stop. 1985 is a really famous Brier. Did he watch that final? Do you know? In person?
We absolutely did. In fact, we thought Pat Ryan won when we were jumping over the board.
Right.
When we found out Hackner won.
Oh, incredible. I did not know that, and I'm sad that I didn't. Okay, at some point, Paul got smart, and he teamed up with the best player he could find, which was Marnie. Together, they won the international title at the Canada 55 Plus Games, representing British Columbia. So during and after all of this high-level play, Paul found time to torment us club curlers with his natural skill, his ability to effortlessly win games. Like, sometimes it seems like he won it all by himself. It was so annoying, but also so amazing. But it was hard to hold it against him, because when the dust settled, you knew that you were in for a cold beverage and a hilarious story. So it was always a pleasure. And we're not the only curling club missing Paul. He had been golfing and curling in BC for 30 years. And as members of the Beaver Valley Curling Club in Fruitvale, Paul and Marnie added some star power to Labor Day golf and curling tournaments by bringing in friends from Briers and provincials that they had made along the way. And that club is missing Paul very much as well. By all accounts, Paul brought energy and enthusiasm and a true love for curling into every curling facility he walked into, and my God, that competitive career was fantastic. We are so grateful that you guys came down here and sprinkled some of that fairy dust on us. And I think it's fitting that we're here together just as the Brier gets kicked off this year. Paul loved the Brier. He went to his first Brier from Edmonton, and 1 year ago, just as Paul was taking his leave from us, a team from Edmonton won the Brier.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really fitting setup.
Yeah.
So thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Paul. Can I do a toast?
Of course.
I would like to do a toast to a wonderful curler and a wonderful friend.
I just want to expand on that a little bit. I don't know if y'all heard Marnie, but Marnie said that Paul got all of his brooms out of the garbage. That was the only thing he got out of the garbage.
Well, shoes.
Shoes. You all seen his shoes. You can probably understand.
Some of those.
And this isn't like some fancy Asham job on the bottom of here. This is a buddy that was a welder. It's just kind of how Paul rolls. Speaking of those brooms out of the garbage, so if you look at the end of his broom, the way he throws this tuck delivery, he's got this end of the broom dragging on the ice. And his broom is probably short about 3 inches, and it's pretty freaking sharp on the end. It's got a little toothpick. So I gave him this one, and I said, you know, you should try this one. It probably wouldn't drag and pull your back end around. And I can tell by the way he looked at me, he wanted to tell me to fuck off. What the hell do you know, kid? But bless his heart, he tried it. And it's like, yeah, I can see what you're saying, but you know, I used to throw him on. And speaking of after the game stuff, I don't know that I ever beat Paul, but sometimes you would even know that you lost. Like, you just come off the ice and be like, I feel like I should have won that game. And he'd always let you know exactly where you screwed up. Usually against me, it ended with, you can't leave me that draw. Every single time. So we've got some videos coming up in Don's going to regale us with Amazing Grace, which is Paul's favorite song. But real quick, I just want to read something from Paul's brother, since we were talking about him a little bit, and they're curling together, that he wanted me to read for this event. It's his brother Derek. Hi everyone. Marnie told us about this great get-together to remember and celebrate my brother Paul and share some stories. This is his younger brother Derek and my wife and Paul's sister-in-law Bev. Paul is 8 years older than I am and was a huge influence to both Bev and I. It was because of Paul that I started curling at the Granite Curling Club in Winnipeg. One of my first curling memories was Paul skipping his high school team in the finals to represent Manitoba in the National Curling Championships. Eric actually told me earlier today that if he had won that, he lost the final, he would have been the only skip to represent 3 different provinces.
He'd have been the first.
The first. Sorry.
Earl Morris ended up becoming that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he told you that would have been his ticket to the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Yeah. So he lost the provincial final multiple times in addition to his 2 Brier appearances. Where was I here? Oh yeah, I think it was 1964 and the game was being played at our home club, the Granite. The place was packed behind the glass, as were the bleachers on the ice. It was being broadcast live on the local radio station. What a thrill for a 10-year-old to hear his big brother on the radio and see him in the sports section of the paper. It was that moment I knew I wanted to be just like my big brother. I even changed from a flat foot delivery to the infamous Manitoba tuck. I had it down pat with the exception that I threw from the proper side of the hack versus him being left-handed. Throwing from the wrong side. Our dream of playing together had to wait a few years until I could play men's. We moved to Alberta in the late 70s, and our first year together, we lost the provincial final. The following year, we won it, and we were in our first Canadian Brier. I was lead, and our second was a curler you may have heard of, Pat Ryan, who went on to 11 Briers, 3 Canadian championships, and a world title. Pat will tell you what a huge influence Paul had on him and taught him so much. How to read the ice, strategy, and most importantly, how to win. The rest is history. I am so proud to be part of Paul's legacy. I think of Paul every day and miss him so. Paul was a wonderful big brother and was always there for me growing up, and then with Bev and our family. A few years ago, Bev and I were visiting Paul and Marnie in Phoenix, and they brought us to your Oasis in the Desert, the Coyote Curling Club. We got to meet some of the members as we sat around the honor bar. I could see that he was still teaching anyone that would listen about the great game of curling and how to win. Thank you for taking time out of your spring training bonspiel to remember and celebrate Paul. If you have a drink or a beer in your hand, raise it up, Paul. This one's for you, Paul. Cheers, big brother.
Cheers.
And I'm just going to go right into Pat Ryan.
Yeah.
Could someone go outside and check on Don and see if he's like 5 minutes out or so? I know he's getting warmed up right now. So Pat recorded this and sent it over to us to play today. Uh-oh.
Hello, Coyote Curling Club, and thank you for having me at Paul Devlin's Celebration of Life. Paul has been very influential to me in life and in curling. He showed me how to win at curling. He skipped us to our first Brier, my first Brier, and did it pretty well single-handedly with an aggressive style of calling and some wonderful curling on his part. We shared so much fun, and everything was a story, and nobody could tell the stories better than Paul. Even if he told the same story again, I still wanted to hear it because it was always so good the way he could do it. And if there's ever anyone that could be a big brother to me, it would be Paul. As I said, he influenced my outlook to people, to things, to circumstances, to opportunities, and like I said, he showed me how to win. Very competitive person, and tenacious would be maybe even a better word to describe Paul, but he saw humor in everything. Anyway, I wanted to play this little song for you that I played quite a bit this last year as I was thinking about Paul as he's going through his struggles. And this song somehow brought me a little bit of comfort. And I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has the same feelings about Paul as I do, because everyone seems to always share the same thoughts about him. This song's from Tim McGraw. It's called My Old Friend. My old friend, I recall good times we had. I remember them all, I wouldn't trade them for gold. 'Cause they laughed and they cried, they somehow sanctified. I've woven them in the stories I have told, and I'll tell again. My old friend, my old friend, I apologize for the years that have passed since the last time you and I dusted off those memories of the running and the races, the people and the places. There was always somewhere else I had to be. Time grew thin, my old friend. My old friend, this song's for you, 'cause a few simple verses, that's a piece I can do, tell the world you were here, and the love and the laughter live on long after all of our burden and our tears, and we'll meet again, my old friend, my old friend, my old friend. Goodbye.
All right, Mr. Don Weaver has a rendition of Amazing Grace he'd like to play for us. Wherever he went.
Exit stage left.
Thanks, Devlin. I've got a couple of the videos I'm going to show you guys. One of these was from a old teammate.
Member for Courtney East.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great sadness to announce today the passing of one of BC curling's great stars. And from Fruitvale was a curling mainstay in BC's interior and across Western Canada for decades. Paul was a fierce competitor, hailing from Manitoba. He traversed the curling world, skipping in 2 Briars, one for Alberta and one in BC, and losing numerous finals. As mentioned, as a fierce competitor to anyone he played against, he was also a great mentor for anyone he played with. My personal curling experience with Paul was that his team of Dean Horning, Don Freshy, and Grant Fines were my very first memories of the Kootenay rivalry between the East and West Kootenays. Even in opposition, Paul taught me a lot, mostly how to lose. Paul will be remembered for his tenacity and extreme confidence. His confidence was so strong that in the rare event that you would win a game, Paul would quickly correct you in the lounge after the match on how you actually lost. Paul's passing during this week's Briar event is complimentary to the life he dedicated to and inspired others to follow. On behalf of myself and the routing of Kootenay East, I extend my sincere condolences to Marnie, Paul's family, and many friends. The curling world has truly lost a legend. Rest in peace, my friend.
We got one more for you here.
Hello, I'm Mike Devlin. I wanted to say a few words about my Uncle Paul. I first met Uncle Paul probably at the 85 Briar. I was 3 months old. It was in Moncton. I was a big Bubs guy. Go Bubs go. But the whole family was there. Uncle Paul was there, Pat Ryan was there. We had a great time. We drank some beers. It was fantastic. Uncle Paul was always a winner, especially when it came to curling. Hated the cheaters, the guys from Ontario, shoveling the snow in front of the rock. Couldn't stand it. Uncle Paul always knew how to win. I remember Uncle Paul for a lot of good reasons. One funny story I have about my uncle was about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, me and some friends asked to stay with him for a night as we were coming through trail on our way to a concert in Seattle, or outside of Washington. And Uncle Paul gladly and Marty took us in, fed us, gave us some beers, and gave us some directions on how to get there. And the internet was fully available at the time. But Uncle Paul insisted about bringing out the atlas. Atlas, how to get from the trail to the gorge in Washington. And we found that pretty fun. We had a couple laughs and a couple beers over it. I would like to just share cheers right now. Paul and everyone else who's having a drink for him. Cheers.
We drank a lot of beer.
I've always said I really would love to hang out with you guys about 30 years ago. I bet I could not keep up.
You were too young then.
Oh yeah, I was drinking milk like him. A couple months old. You want to come up and say a few words, Marty?
Okay, here we go. Is Tatiana here? Just kind of, you're okay. I have to read this for your sake and for mine. Thank you so much. This is overwhelming. And thank you to him and to her and Louise and everybody else. It's amazing. I have to put these down. I'm going to read this, so I'm going to start by saying I have so much to say about Paul Devlin, but I'm going to focus on his love of curling. But remember though, that curling did not define him alone. Oh, what's your name?
Devlin.
Oh my God.
Surprise.
These guys curled with him.
Oh, cool.
He's from Devlin today. Holy cow. Anyway, I have to be fast. So anyway, he was an amazing family man. He raised my two daughters with his grandchildren. He taught them so much. He taught them how to be cagey and smart game players. He taught them to be adventurous, to be respectful and confident, but mostly he taught them to have fun. He was also a successful businessman and a lover, world traveler, and actively hated any and all governments. And if you ever had to listen to him, it was painful. Towards the end of his life, when he would get on his bandwagon, he'd say, "I know you don't want to hear this, but..." What's your gut? It was awful. Okay, so let's talk about Paul Devlin and curling. He started at age 11. He was tiny but feisty. Over the years, he and his teams enjoyed successes in 3 provinces and nationals, and I didn't even know all the ones that she knows. It was clear that although Paul always tried to play well, curling was much more than just winning. For Paul, curling was about lifelong friendships, and I think a lot of you know that. It was about camaraderie. It was about honest competition. Like Michael said, anybody that cheated was right away gone.
Screw those Ontario
Gone.
bastards.
Those assholes. The need for strong and healthy teamwork. He worked on that and he believed in that more than anything. Learning, dreams, and stories. Lots of stories. Like Pat Ryan said, he was a storyteller. And I kept hearing new ones, you know. At 74 years old, I thought, oh, you're making them up here. That marijuana came back. It was a problem for a while. Okay. That doesn't mean that Paul did not want to win. He told me once, and I'm sure a lot of you guys feel this way, that if you lost an important game and you didn't cry, you just didn't try hard enough. And that was it. I bet you can relate to that, and all of you here, in one way, shape, or form. Oh yeah. When Paul put a team together, he never looked for the most talented player, the best shooter, the best sweeper. Instead, he looked for heart. That burning desire that kindles, grows, and never dies. He called it the fire in the belly, and those are the people he looked for. He knew who possessed it, and he also knew who did not. He was pretty canny, bordering on sneaky, but he always knew. Teamwork was critical. It was all about we and self-appointed heroes were not wanted. He wanted to learn, he wanted to continually learn about curling, and he wanted his team to do the same. But mostly, and you've been on his team, I'm in shock. Where am I? But mostly he wanted his team to dream and believe, and most of them did. But in 2014, his attitude changed. He decided to quit curling completely. Like, never again, no curling, not going, not doing it. He was completely happy with his decision, but nobody else was. Nobody else was. And he'd walk around, he'd say, I don't curl, I don't curl, no, I don't curl. That was his mantra. And nobody wanted to listen to that, and for one, I wanted to bloody kill him. He took a lot of fun out of my life when he made that decision. But in 2014, his attitude changed, and it was because of you. All of you. And it started with Tom and Sean and Kathy, and as he met people, you guys gave him back that fire in his belly. So, every fall, he couldn't wait to come back. He talked about it, he phoned people down here all the time, he phoned Les and Lauren and everybody. He just wanted to be here. He was at home. He was at home. Paul's life was enriched greatly by being a coyote, and for that I am forever grateful. Thank you. Now I want to switch gears for just a minute, and Jeff, come up.
He's over here.
Your wife? Oh.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Paul was very sick for a long time. He didn't know it, I didn't know. For instance, in October 2019, blood work showed that something was wrong. Nobody told him. We came down to Arizona for the winter, and when we went back on March 21st, he really did feel awful. He couldn't breathe, he couldn't get warm, and he tried to see a doctor. But the doctors were just taking telephone appointments. They wouldn't see anybody, and the labs were closed. So from March to December, he could not get any help. And as this was going on, he was declining. But he still believed that he would live. On February 25th, and I phoned Sean, I know, and I phoned Lauren, I'm not sure about Cass, I don't think I have your phone number. February 25th, 2 massive heart attacks put him on to life support. I needed some help with someone in the medical community. It's like, well, yeah. And for 11 days, Jeff carried me and my family through a horrible, horrible time. I don't even remember what we talked about, I just know you helped. On March 7th, which is on Monday, 2021, Paul slipped away as the result of complications related to leukemia. It was a sad journey. It was a pretty quick journey, but you know, he's still here. He's in this ring. He's here. I felt him this morning, and I think I was getting shit. Anyway, thank you. This is thank you not from me to you.
And Tracy.
Also, I'm going to leave in a minute. Because the coyotes were so important to Paul, and he loved them so much, he loved you so much, I want to show our gratitude, and my nose is red. I'd like to make a donation of $2,000 in Paul's name.
Thank you so much, Marnie. That was great. And it was when you threw the one through the house this morning, right? You told me about that a little bit earlier. I think it's when you. Jane, you got a good story about Paul here to share with us?
Well, I have a story that I've told some of you before about me, which is short, but I also have one to read. Do you want me to do both?
Sure.
So mine is this. So I loved playing against Paul because, as we've all talked about, you learned everything. You learned something every time, whether you wanted to or not. But I think I beat him once. That was a great day. Marty was watching, and I said, "I'm sorry, Marty. This is going to be a long drive home." So, anyway, one day out on the ice, I mean, I admired him a lot. He said to me, just out of the blue, he said, you know, I love playing against you. And I was like, what? Like, me, why? And he said, well, two things. One, you know what you're doing, but two, I can see everything. I said, okay. Thanks, Paul. You know, I'll take that compliment. That's fine. A little backhanded, but I'll take it. But this one that I have to read is from a really very, very valued club member, Brian Cristal, who could not be here tonight, but he wanted to send this. I'm going to try to read it and do him justice, but if you know Brian, you know he's just wonderful. So here it goes. He says, many people will say many kind words about Paul Devlin. I will add a few of my own. Paul climbed the curling mountain. He played in Briars. His success can be measured by him having his very own Wikipedia page. You might not have known this. But to me, none of his curling accomplishments come close to the measure of the man. My measure was and is that he loved. He loved me. This I know and this I felt. I did not ever have to even throw a curling rock to earn it. There was nothing I had to do for him. His caring was genuine. It was full. His caring made me a better man. Not a better curler, a better man. He radiated this caring to others too. That light still shines and will keep shining through me and the others. All his curling rocks are now all in the house. Paul is in that house too. He is home, knowing he made a difference in the hearts of all he touched. My love to Paul and Marnie from Brian.
I can ask. Maybe Lindsay can. Lindsay's got something that Renee wrote that she'd like us to read.
Renee, Paul's daughter. Paul, my hero, friend, and dad. So greatly missed every day, and Paul is thought of and needed so very often. He was a wonderful father and friend. Always there for me, and always open to my stories as I was his. Lots of laughs we shared, and lots of love and understanding too. Paul just didn't give a shit about anything, but what is most important in life. Family, friends, pets, and good times filled with lots of laughs. Oh, and curling too. There are no words to explain how much he was needed in my life. Almost a buddy to me at times when he wasn't a dad, and no amounts counted as to how many times I've needed him since his passing. I still cry sometimes when I know he is gone and not accessible to laugh with or talk to, but I often look up into the night sky knowing he is looking down at me. I can feel his warm, cheeky, loving smile, which brings me some peace knowing Paul was my dad and he loved me so very much. He was my husband's best friend. Christopher loved, respected, and admired him incredibly. I am not sure who was happier on my wedding day for marrying the most wonderful husband, Paul or me. And what an amazing grandfather he was, the best. He and G-Ma made such an amazing grandparenting team who are both so loved by all their grandchildren. They all miss him deeply. He and my mom created so many fantastical memories. A great amount of love and laughs were shared with G-Pa over the past 25 years. Paul was so much fun. Again, he was the best. We all wish we had him back here with us and would do anything for anything for another one of his stories. Even ones we had all heard of over 25 times. He was such a noble and stoic man, an amazing patriarch and loving soul who had time for anyone that wanted it, except the government. Not a big fan of the government. I am so grateful and honored that I got to be there with him till his last breath, which was 9 minutes before the first briar walk was thrown. So I know where he went right after. And I have to share that unreal experience with my loving mother and devoted sister. We made a great team and Paul would have been proud. I added the last minute touch and put a cold bud in his hand. So he left us with a little something from home. Then off to Calgary to be with his brother and family in the front row at the Briar. We miss you, Paul. And so then a toast. So please tip a glass to serve Paul Devlin, the great. And please try to find this song and play it when all together. I promise you will have a good time listening to it. It's perfect.
No, we don't have a song. Sorry, we screwed that up.
We'll put that on.
We'll put that on when it's at the end. Bobby, Fred?
Show me.
Yeah.
Bob's delegating.
As I would expect.
I'll keep this short. I have two quick stories about Paul. Sorry, you didn't move when I said
I'm
short.
giving you
I didn't-
space. I'll take that from Paul, but not from you.
So, someone mentioned earlier the controversy in 1984 with Paul. So Paul's a little bit infamous in Alberta for some curling things that happened, and then I might have been a little bit infamous for some things that happened later as well. So the funny thing is, I didn't actually know Paul when I was curling in Alberta. He moved to BC before I started to play, so I never actually met him. My first time I met him was here in this club, but I knew all about him, and because I played with Ed Lukovic for so long, I had heard a lot of stories. But you can imagine the stories that I heard about Paul were, let's just say, less than glowing, right? So I came into the club one night and Paul's here watching Marnie. He wasn't playing, he's watching Marnie. And so I started talking, I didn't know who he was. I started talking to him, and then all of a sudden he turned and introduced me, he said, I'm Paul Devlin, and I went. And he goes, kind of looks at me funny, and I said, I'm Fred Maxey. We both went, oh. So it turns out both of us are nicer than what we'd heard about him.
One of you are.
So, anyway, at that time, I had said to Paul, I'm like, well, so are you going to curl? No, I don't curl. That was the same story that Michael. I'm done. I'm never curling again. What did he make it? A year? Maybe a year? Not even a year, right? He was back out of the ice right away. And so the other story that I want to tell is Mac, that used to curl my mixed team. I don't know, a lot of you guys know Mac. Mac is the craziest curling historian ever. He knows every story about every briar. He knows everything. So after I met Paul, I went home and I texted back. I'm like, hey, I met Paul Devlin tonight. He was like, what? You met Paul Devlin? And so the next time there was a spiel here, Paul was here. I had my team down, and I said, Mac, I want to introduce you to Paul Devlin, but please be nice to the man. Don't just talk to him forever. And Mac's like, I swear, I'll be good. They were sitting at the corner of the bar for 3 hours. I don't know. At one point, we were like, Mac, we're going to go eat because we got to play later. He's like, just go, I'm good. And Paul sat there and told him stories for the whole night. It was really awesome. Mac, when we got back to the house, Mac was like, that was the best day of my life. It was so good. So Paul told him a whole story about the 85 Briar and everything. Yeah, he told me everything. Mac was like, oh my God, it was amazing. So
Should have recorded it.
we probably should have, yeah. We probably should have. So he was a great guy. Marnie, thank you very much to Paul.
Mr. Lord?
So Les and I curled in our first bonspiel here, I don't know, around 7 or 8 years ago. And since then, we've curled in 2 or 3 spiels every year. And almost every spiel, it would seem that we'd butt heads against Paul. And we'd end up against him, right? And over time, watching him skip, calling shots that normal club players don't call, I could tell this guy must have curled at a higher level. So what did I do? I Googled him. So then I saw some of his accomplishments. He had been in 2 Briars, which everybody knows now, right? And Pat and Ryan, I'm going, holy shit, right? Now I am scared to curl against him. So anyways, over time, and then in 2019, we ended up playing in this spring training bonspiel, and we ended up playing him in the A final. And it was a hell of a game. I remember we were 3 down going into the 7th end, and we ended up getting 3 to tie. And on the 8th end, Megan, Les's daughter, who played lead for us, and made 2 perfect shots to set up the end. And then she went in to breastfeed her baby. And then the rest of us made our shots too. And it came down to Paul having to drop to bite the button. And he was like 3 inches heavy, right? and we ended up winning. So I couldn't believe it that we won, and what a hell of a game it was. So right after the game was over, I was in the dressing room with Paul, myself, Paul, and I think Gary McKnight was in there. And I had been thinking of this for a while, that I would really like to curl with him. So I asked him. So, where am I? Sorry, I'm not a public speaker. Yeah. Anyways, his first instant response was no. So maybe my timing was a little off. So anyways, so later on that summer, I get a call from Paul, and the first thing he says to me, he says, I have to apologize for being so short with you, but when you asked me to curl, but it was like 10 minutes after you lost. And he says, you have to give me a little time to get over it. So anyways, he asked us if we wanted to curl, with Sean Keeling, and he asked if Les would come along, and we did. And I tell you, it was the highlight of my life, really. Sorry. So during the short time that I had the pleasure to curl with Paul, it was one of my best experiences I've had curling. Once you've curled with Paul, you really realize how good he really is. Even at my age, he taught me a lot, right? I was so sad when our season got cut short because of COVID, but I was very touched when Paul said on a number of occasions that he hadn't had so much fun since he was in the Briar. And Marnie also said that there was a spark in his eye, and I said, yeah, right? And so I'm so grateful for that. So, well, Paul, I'm humbled and honored to have curled with you, and most of all, to call you my friend. And I'm sorry it's not a blue, but I had one this afternoon. Oh, Jesus.
Thanks, Lord. Jane has a poem from Kaylin, one of Paul's granddaughters.
One of his granddaughters, who she says, your little button or princess. She wrote, I know days are often full and I ran from place to place. Everything fell into a lull as I kept this hectic pace. But when I heard the awful news, my heart was smashed to bits. You were a love not ready to lose, not wanting time with you that only fate permits. I wish I'd spent more time learning from your past. Time with you was sublime. Life goes way too fast. I miss your smile and your voice. I loved your strength and care. If I had my own choice, I'd reach out and you'd be there.
And I have a card here from Kathy Coolidge from Marnie that she wanted me to read to you. And it says, good curling, which is what looks like homemade curling rocks in the front. Kathy says, my friend Paul was always such a positive skip and taught me so much about curling and strategy. I look forward to Marnie and Paul's arrival every winter to curl with them. Paul had a great smile and a contagious laugh. I loved his stories and listening to his political views. At least someone liked listening to them, I guess. I hope he knew how much I thought of him. Very sweet, Kathy. I have something else to read from Paul's daughter, Courtney. I will never forget what Paul did for us. He took in a crazy cougar, Marnie. Ray and I, treated us like his own. He coached our sports teams, taught us how to drive, protected us from danger, literally tethered himself to her when they traveled to Hong Kong together. It made us laugh with every outrageous but true story he told. We cannot thank him enough. I will hold my memories close to my heart. He was the most amazing grandfather with all his kids. There are no words that describe how much they all loved Paul, just watching their smiles when he would play games and tell stories to them. I was scared that I will forget Paul as time goes on, but I know that it won't happen, as he is everywhere. You don't have to look far. I'm sure you will all have little things that remind you of Paul. The first one is whistles. My first real memory of Paul was when we moved to Vancouver. I was super sad, and he made the trip so uplifting by singing songs like Dinah Want to Glow and trying to teach me how to whistle. He has 100 different ways to whistle. I've heard many of them. Usually when the speakers don't hear him yell the first time. I'm sure some of you have heard them as well. Curling. After every curling game, he could recite every shot that was made and always had a suggestion or tell you what you should have done. Heard that a number of times already as well. Kyle said he will think of him when there is a great shot made. He can always picture him saying they were lined up. Jane's going to help me with acting this one out.
Oh, God. All right.
When Paul was excited or cold or giggling, he would always slap his hands together, sticking his tongue out and rub them together to create heat. Paul's a big Eagles fan. She says in here that every time she hears Hotel California, I will picture Paul dancing his funny little dance at the curling rink. I don't know that one.
Me neither.
But maybe Marty can show us. Tobogganing. How Paul flew off the bank and shot into the tree as the jump we made was for small people. He walked up with his tail between his legs. He broke 3 ribs. Anytime Paul hurt anything, it was usually his ribs and toes. Stories. Paul had the most outrageous true stories. You would think they couldn't get any better, but they always did. Please grab a shot or a drink. As we raise our glass for Paul, let's take a moment to remember the many ways Paul improved our lives. You will be missed, but never forgotten. Is there anybody else who would like to come up and share any stories? We've got lots of time. Please don't be shy. I know he touched a lot of you. Sean? Feel free to stand up. Come on up here. Whatever you want to do, bud.
Stay there. Come on up. Whatever you like.
There's a provision. If I get emotional, you shut the video off. Agreed? Agreed? One with the face. Hey, so never trust a gaddy is what it is.
Just stand there.
You should have learned that a long time ago.
I gotta be honest with everybody, I didn't want to come up here.
None of us did.
Right? Right. And there's probably 3 or 4 different speeches I could give. One of them, none of you would want to hear. And so I'm going to try to give you the one that you might want to hear. And I'm going to do my best at that. I wish I was Daryl in this moment, because he's so good at talking in front of people and not.
Channel.
Please, channel it to me, because I'm not good at this.
You got it.
And I'm pretty emotional about this whole thing, and it's been tearing me up for about a year and a half or whatever it's been, and I don't even know because it's pretty crazy. But I guess I'll start from the beginning, and I didn't know who the hell Paul was. I curled with Marnie on Thursday morning, and I thought it was awesome because I was a brand new curler, and I was fired up, and I was wanting to know everything, and I was happy, and didn't matter what happened out there, I was having a good time, and it was me, Tom, and Kathy, and I remember somewhere in the season, Marty says, "Okay, guys, my husband's gonna sub for me because I got to do whatever the hell." And Tom and Kathy didn't. They weren't phased, but me, I was like, "Oh, whoa," because Marty was awesome. And who the hell was this guy? Who the hell was this guy that's gonna sub for Marty? And I said, I pulled Marty aside and I said, "Marty, what's with your husband? He's from Canada, so he knows how to curl, right?" And Marty says, "Well, he's really a golfer." He's in Arizona to golf, but he knows how to curl. You'll be fine. Just do what he says. Make sure you do what he says, and everything will be great. So that's exactly what I did, because if any of you have been my skipper, you know that I do what the hell I'm told to do. And so this guy comes. Okay, for the most part.
Except Jeff.
So this guy comes in and he's off the golf course or whatever, and he switches into tennis shoes. He's got the tennis shoes, right? Yeah. This is his slider, you know? And I've just spent, $150 on gold mines, and I'm like, what the hell's this? And I'm cursing Marty in my mind. But I had a great time, and of course we won.
Of course, yeah.
So that's what started it, and so from there it was like, it's going to be a mess. Okay, so just bear with me. But
You're good, Sean.
Paul did not want to curl. He did not want to curl when I met him. I didn't know anything about his past. I didn't Google him. I'm old school, and I think that's why me and Paul hit it off so well. He was old school. Paul was totally old school. Not PC, just like me. Hated government, just like me. So, we hit it off from the beginning, and it turned into the occasional, he would sub more, and then, I don't know, Tanya, did we curl in a league with him in the
I
beginning?
did, and then we went to Las Vegas.
Okay, so-
On a bond steel, and then Canada.
All right, so slow down. Okay, so for some reason he wants to curl, and maybe, and I always believed because Marty loved curling with Paul. Marty loved curling with Paul, and Paul didn't want to curl.
That's why he quit.
And he didn't want to do it, so probably it enabled for the two of us to curl with the two of you in the beginning. In the beginning. So let's go play in a bond sphere. So we end up in Las Vegas, and it was a wonderful yet horrible experience. If you can imagine, you had to throw a takeout to get to the tee line. And Paul was frustrated, and we didn't perform well, but I didn't care. I was having a good time, and I was away and on a bond spiel. So Paul says, "Hey, I'm gonna hitch a ride with you back to Arizona." And okay, no problem. So I don't remember what you did. But
I had to stay.
you had to stay.
Yeah, in
So
Las
Tatiana,
Vegas.
yeah, you had to stay. So Tatiana and I and Paul drove back from Vegas, and we talked about all kinds of stuff. I played a lot of music, and we bonded. And one of the funny it was funny to me. It might not be funny to you. The funny conversation that I remember from that trip was there was this long pause, and Paul says, "Sean, who do you think is the best curler in your club?" And I don't think at this time I knew he played in a Briar, and I didn't really pay attention to professional curling at the time. I didn't really know any of the history of it or any of that stuff. But I answered right away, "Paul, you are, Paul." It was just instant for me, because I'll tell you why in a second, but the funny part is, I said, well, I think that most people in the club would argue that Bob LeClaire is the best player. But I think you are. So he got a really big kick out of that little conversation, and I think on some level, accidentally, I was sharing this passion that I had, that he had lost. And I was excited about him and our relationship. And I don't know,
Yep.
So, I should have wrote some stuff down, but I didn't want to get up here, so.
We got you.
So, all right, so I just want to stop and tell you, if you're a new curler, if you love this sport as much as I do, so like when I first started, I didn't know shit, obviously, but and a lot of people in this room took a lot of time to share their passion with me and to explain to me what the hell this is. Because to somebody who grew up most of his life in Arizona, then what is curling? I didn't know it until I saw it in the Olympics. But Paul went a step further for me because of our connection or whatever, and he wanted to curl with me, and I never understood that. But fast forward to I need to fast forward to the second part of Lauren's story. Is after that Bonspiel that we got beat, he was fucking pissed. He was so pissed. Okay, here, I got it. So, back up a little bit. One of the things that we couldn't agree on was, I just wanted to be on the ice with him. And I didn't care. And that's how I feel about most of you that I curl with. I want to have a good time. And it doesn't matter to me if I win or not. Yeah, it's fun to win and whatever, but that wasn't how it was with Paul. It didn't matter what night you were playing, or what Bonspiel, or it could have been the Briar, or it could have been Social League. It didn't matter. He was out there to win, and he wanted to create that sense of competition and in me, and I just wanted to have a good time. And so I think we met in the middle somewhere. But he always used to say, Sean, you don't have to love to win, but you better hate losing. You better hate losing. So, anyways, so fast forward to me losing that Bonspiel, right? Paul calls me on the phone and he says, Sean, Lauren invited us, or he didn't say us, he said Lauren wants to create a team, a competitive team to play. And I said, Lauren and Les, and he said, yeah. And I said, so. Okay, back up. We used to get beat by Les. My first encounter with Les was this rattly old broom that completely took my concentration away when I was a young curler, and I still am, but when I was a younger curler, and I was like, I don't want to play with that guy, he's annoying. This is what I felt, right? Not in that moment, but in general. And Les is always so serious on the ice, and he looks like he's always mad at you. And I don't want that for a teammate, right? So I say, Paul, Les is always fucking pissed. I don't know if I want that kind of a teammate. And he said, Sean, you look like you're always pissed. So I said, like I always said, usually, most always, Paul, you're right. You're right. He said, and don't forget, those guys are farmers. And I said, oh, okay. If I got to play with Angry Les and Goofy Lauren, then... because that's what I thought Lauren was Les's goofy sidekick. So I said, Les, I'm sorry, I said, Paul, those guys are really good. And you're fucking excellent. So I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but I'm not the guy. You want to be competitive. find another lead. And I was completely serious about that. And Paul said, no. You and me, and that's the end of it.
That's good.
So I said, okay, let's do it. And these are the best guys, these two. We had a lot of fun in a short amount of time. There was a moment when the four of us, it was supposed to be, hey, you know, we want to be in the men's MOPAC.
Yes.
Right. That was the whole thing. That was one of the whole things.
Yeah.
And we were pretty crushed when we found out, well, these guys are Canadian. And they don't live here long enough to qualify to be in MOPAC. So I had another Paul and I, after the fact, or down the road a little bit, Paul and I had another conversation. He said, Sean, look, you're never going to be on that men's banner with the three of us. And I said, Paul, I don't give a shit. I said, I don't care about banners. I just want to play with you. I just want to spend time with you. It doesn't matter what you want to do. And that's how our friendship progressed. I ended up in wherever the hell, Canada.
That's a pretty big time.
I learned about lakes that I couldn't pronounce the names. And the forests are burning, but Marnie wants to take me on a zip line through a great glacier park. and
Riding boats and getting stuck on sand dunes.
yeah,
That was
but I didn't care. I just wanted to have fun with these two guys right here and with Paul. And then we get to 2020, or no, 2019, of course. All y'all Canadians disappeared for some reason. No, 2020, right? 2020. All y'all Canadians disappeared. And life got pretty crazy for everybody. And for me too. And Paul would call once in a while, and it would be a conversation like this. How are the girls? How's the farm? What are you doing? Because he's bored as shit up there. You know, I guess the BC people don't want to let you out of the house or whatever. And he was always saying, hey, I've got this crazy, you know, we're going to, Les and Lorne and me and you, we're going to go to this Bonspiel or wherever the hell in Canada. It seemed like a different one every time he'd call. And for me, 2020 with Paul was like waiting for the mandates and the bullshit to end so that he could come home, Arizona home for him. And we could resume what we were supposed to be doing in life. One phone call and another one. And you get discouraged, and there's more mandates and more vaccination bullshit, and pretty soon it's closed and nobody can do anything. The last conversation I had, the next to the last conversation I had with Paul was on January 6th, 2021. He calls me in the morning and he says, Sean, what the fuck is going on in your country? And I said, Paul, I don't know. What is going on in my country? And he said, they're going crazy down there. You need to turn on the TV. So I went in the living room, turned on the TV, and there's all this bullshit happening in Washington. We didn't, that conversation was bad. It wasn't a good conversation. I wasn't angry with him and he wasn't angry with me. We just didn't understand. It was in the moment. This historic event's happening and I don't understand it, he doesn't understand it, and his impression is different than mine, and we're not seeing eye to eye. No bad words were exchanged or anything, it's just felt when we hung up the phone that it wasn't right. And I did what I typically do in these situations. I let the life slip away, and I go into my anger. Not at him. Please don't think that. Not at Paul, but just at life in general. I just get bad about what's going on in the world because I don't understand the reason for any of it. But the shitty part is the next conversation I have with Paul is Marty's holding the phone to his head in the hospital. He's leaving this world. So everybody in this room probably has a story about fucked up 2020 and fucked up 2021. I'm not trying to take away from that. I'm just trying to say that I miss my friend. And I don't like how it ended. And I wish he was here.
I think he loved you.
He loved you.
I know that. I'm just mad. And I'm sorry for that. I'm just mad. And if you see me on the ice and I don't seem like I used to be, or if I seem mad at you, which I'm not, I'm just mad at what's going on. I'm mad that I'm angry that it's taking opportunities for people to be together. Whatever your political position is, I get it, but at the end, we're all human beings. And we'd rather be doing this than not being able to be with each other when we need each other. So I love my friend, and I miss my friend, and that's how I want to end this stupid speech that I'm giving. So here's the ball.
Good job, Sean.
Thank you for coming up, Sean. That's just a little bit of insight into what an important person he was to a lot of people. Is anybody else that wants to share something? Alright, we all have some thrills to do. I'm going to wrap this up with one final toast. This is an old Irish toast that Jane found. Always remember to forget the things that made you sad. Never forget to remember the things that make you glad. We can all remember Paul for making us glad. Know that. Cheers. 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 Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.